So now let's talk about edges. When we do blind solving, we separate the corners and the edges. There's some really cool stuff that allows us to separate it. But really what you need to know is that when we're doing corners, we're only worried about corners. When we're doing edges, we're only worried about edges. So now we're going to do only edges here. In corners, we swapped A and P. So we were doing an algorithm that would switch those two pieces specifically, right? And we undo that, and it's like, cool, and it's solved. So in edges, we're going to be swapping these two pieces. Now the spef system still applies to edges, except instead of starting on this corner, you start on this edge and go clockwise. A, B, C, D, like that. And you can imagine it goes the same here. E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. This is why I'm saying it's very useful to do blind solving with just corners for a while, because you get a sense for where those letters are going to be for your edges. You know what I mean? And there's more edges, so they take longer and they're a little more arduous. So it's nice to go in with some steam, you know, after knowing how corners work. So in corners, you could be like QRST and then go, oh, with edges, it'll be QRST, and then UVWX. So our spot that swaps, these two are going to be swapping. And this is the piece that is similar to that one, right? So instead of figuring out where this piece needs to go, we're figuring out where this piece needs to go. B, our buffer is B. So if we, the algorithm we use to switch these out, by the way, is a T-perm. So we literally just do a T-perm, and it switches these two pieces and leaves those two intact. That's really all we're doing there. And there's some other algorithms you can use here, like J-perms, but in the way that I do it, and a good way to start off just to only have to know two algs, is T-perm. So basically, right now we have kind of the last letter of a letter pair list. You can imagine this would be, where does this piece go? It goes to D. So this would just be D. T-perm will lead to D. So edges are a little bit trickier to set up to, because what you have to do is move the piece here. So if this is an unsolved edge, it has to go there. That's a pretty easy one. You know, you just set up to that. And then you do this, you know, and it'll swap those two out. But another thing that's really important is that you can't move these two corners when you're doing a T-perm, because those are going to be swapping or twisting or something. So basically just remember, you can't move these two corners when you're setting these up. You can do anything else. So you can do a D-wide move, which is all the time you want to use those. You can do an L-wide move, right? As long as all of this stays intact, you can do anything you want to set up these cases. There's some really interesting M moves that a lot of people use, but I'm not worried about I'm worried about the concept, not the specific execution of it. The concept is that we're switching this piece with that piece. That's literally it. So let's say we do want, what is this? I, J, K, L. Let's say we do want L. Actually, let's do two. We're going to do L and let's make it easy, R. So we're going to swap out L and then R. And then we're going to use that as our example to solve. So to switch out L, we move this up there, and we haven't moved these three pieces, so we're allowed to do that. We're allowed to set up to there. We're going to do a T-perm, and then we're going to unset that up, right? And then we want to do R, QR, so we just move this up here to D, and we swap it out with a T-perm, and then we unset that up. Now we can see, aw, dang, we've got an unsolved piece in this spot. We need to figure out where it goes. And it's going to be the opposite of what we just did. So where does this piece need to go? Well, it's blue, orange. Here's orange, here's blue, and then it needs to go there. And that's QR. So, and then what's currently in the R position? R goes there. And that's IJKL. So it's RL. And then we'll just throw in a quick little memory tactic here. If I were currently in the middle of a solve and I needed to remember RL, I would probably use R.L. Stine, who wrote Goosebumps, you know. So I'm going to picture R.L. Stine in my brain, or just a Goosebumps book, you know. I'm going to kind of use that as my memory so I can close my eyes, set up to R, do a T-perm, unset up to R, and then set up to L, do a T-perm, and unset up to L. And if I open my eyes, then, oh, there it is. The cube is solved. Even genuinely just doing those two, I'm like, did I do that right? I did actually close my eyes. And there's a chance that I may have missed a turn or something. You know, my T-perms are not great. So it's really fun. It's really, really cool. And if you're really familiar with corners at this point, then you'll know that that's really easy to do, right? You just, it's like, yeah, you just do R and L. And I suggest, again, just like you did with corners, I suggest playing with your edges right now. So go for everything that's not this edge, you know what I mean? Because you will also have to flip. Edges get really confusing to track, by the way. Usually, so like with corners, there's like, you can usually get the move set up in 1 or 2 moves. But with edges, you have to do some really wackadoo stuff to get to this position. As long as these 3 pieces don't move, then you're good. So I'm going to go through the way that I set up all of my edge pieces. That is not necessary. It's absolutely not the best way to set up edge pieces. And that's why I suggest trying it out on your own, because I'll be real with you, you're probably better at figuring this out than I am, because my brain is not good at doing these types of things. So if we start with A, right? My general rule is if I want to set A up to D, right? My general rule is get this sticker on the bottom face and then do an L2 to get it where it needs to go there. So by doing an L wide 2, I'm getting it from this face to this face. And now it's easier for me to track, because it's like all I need to do at this point is get this here. So I'll do a D to get it there, or D prime to get it set up here, and then an L wide 2 to get it set up there. At this point, it's like we've almost scrambled the whole cube again. So that's why it's really important to kind of figure this out in the way that works best for you. Because if you try to brute force memorize these moves, it would be really exhausting. It's more important to kind of conceptualize what system works for you in your own brain. You know, for me, if I remember that I moved something to the bottom face and then aligned it with kind of its opposite, you know, position, it's easier for me to do it that way. So I think it's really critical for you to explore this on your own terms, not to follow what I'm doing here, but instead to understand the concept and execute it in a way, and experiment in a way that works best for you. So then we're just going to do a T-perm, and then we have swapped these 2 pieces out. So now I need to get this back over here. And I know that I do an R wide or an L wide 2 and then move it back there and then do that again. And you'll notice that these 2 pieces have swapped. A has swapped. We've basically just done an algorithm for A. And now we can, B is our buffer, so it doesn't count. We don't do anything with B. And C is kind of the opposite of A. So I'm going to do C real quick. Same moves pretty much, just like instead of starting by moving it here, we move it there. So that set up here, that, and then a T-perm, and then that set up here, and then that. That was wrong. Set up there, and then that. And you notice we end up with a U-perm because we swapped A and B, C, whatever, it doesn't matter. D, notice we don't have to do any setup work for. That, cool. And then like, what is it? E is here. E is tricky. But you can kind of think, I don't know, it's, you just have to like find a system that works for you. I usually just rely on D wide moves at this point. So I'll offset it by 1. And the weird part is you can go in either direction here, right? So I'll offset it by 1, do a D wide move, and then do that, you know? And then I'll just kind of remember that I did that, like conceptually, but you could also do it this way. You know what I mean? You could bring it up from the back and then put it there. So just experiment with what works for you. For me to set up to E, I do L, D wide, and then L prime, and then I do a T-perm. And then I think to myself, what did I just do? And we were doing E. So if I do this, that, and this, I'm back. Okay. Yeah. So that it's kind of like trying to define it too much. It doesn't work for me, but it might work for you to have like super efficient algorithms for all this stuff. So let's just move on. But for me, I'm just kind of like, whatever works, works. F, I'm going to move it back here and then move it up with an L prime, like that. And then that, and then boom, we've done F. G, is kind of like even more difficult than A for me. However, I am sure that there is a better way to do this. So I'll actually set G up to S. So I'll make it look like that, have it back here, you know, and then I'll pull it into my bottom face, and then put it into my left face, and then do that, and then switch it out. And then undo all of that with my very arduous and probably incredibly inefficient switching algorithm or setup algorithm there. H is pretty easy. It's a D wide into L or whatever. That, and then here, wait, H, E, F, G, H. I think it's there. Yeah. Yeah. And then I, same kind of concept with A. Just kind of do this. And then boom, it's back there. J, you know, you could just do a D wide 2 and then that. And you can see that like I don't have this stuff like brute force memorized or anything. It's more of a conceptual understanding. I, J, K. You can set up like an A and then do that. And then do this and that. And then this is pretty straightforward. L is just that, you know. So you get the idea. I'm not even going to sit here and go through all of them. Like if you can do that many, then you can kind of get all of it. But I do suggest going through the entire alphabet. I really enjoyed spelling words while I was doing this. It's just a good practice to kind of get the idea of tracing letters down, you know. And since we've just kind of like goofed around and done all of this, let's take a look at what we've currently got as the scramble. This is an edges only scramble. You can see that all of our corners are solved right now, which is a really great way to practice edges. And we're going to learn how to trace edges. Edges are easier to trace because there's only 2 colors instead of 3. However, you will end up with more. So you're going to have more letter pairs. So remember, we need to figure out where this piece goes. That's really all we're doing when we're tracing edges, is saying, where does this go? And then we're going to be swapping it out. So the next piece that it goes to, we can assume, oh, where does that go? Where does the one after that go? Because it's going to end up right here, and we're going to be asking the same question. So here, this goes there. That's I, J, K, right? So we have K right here, right? This goes there. Now, where does this go? It goes here. And then we have Q, right? Q, and then, is that our buffer? Oh, and then our buffer. So we have a cycle break here. So what we can do right now is, what did I say? K, J, Q. If we do K, J, and Q, our buffer should be solved. So let's experiment. Let's try that out, you know? So let's set up to K first. K is here. There we go. I, J, K. Yep. So K should be solved, and it is. J, K, J, and then do a D2, that, and then do this, T perm, and then undo it, and that should be solved, and it is. And then Q, which is here. So if I do this, that, and this, right? And then Q should be solved, and our buffer is here. Yes, and our buffer is here, and it's twisted, or flipped, which is fine, because we do the same thing here. We find any unsolved edge, and in this case I always go to D. Like if there's an unsolved edge in D, I'm going to go for D, and then I'm going to go for this one, and then I'm going to go for that one. The easiest setup moves is what I go for when I hit a buffer or a cycle in edges. So in this case we already have D, but that's going to be a flip. You remember earlier we had that in the corners too. So I'm not going to go for D this time. I'm going to go for L, because it'll solve more. So this is going to go L, and then C, and then R, L, C, R. And at this point, you can kind of see what's going on. And I'm trying to remember L, C, R, blah. And whatever memorization techniques work for you at this point of the game, when you're just starting out, go for it. This is really goofy. Just LCR for me was a really, really outside idea to memorize this, but it's like MCR, which is My Chemical Romance, but instead it's the lead singer of Less Than Jake. So it's less CR, LCR for that memo, you know, and there might be another letter that comes up afterwards that then will make it like a different thing for me. But That's how memo works. It's super unique to you. And whatever way you can hack your brain the most efficiently and the most quickly, the better off you are at this point. Whatever works for you, whether it's just brute force memorizing the letters, whether you worked at a company called LCR Limited, whether you're doing really goofy shit with songs that you know and like video games that you play, it's just how do you memorize these letters? So far I have LCR, and then R is going to go to UVWX, right? So LCRX. That for some reason fits my narrative here because I used to listen to MCR on a radio station called 99X. So now I've got less CR, less Chemical Romance on 99X. So I have LCRX. And that's what I mean by like it's hyper specific to you. And that's one of my favorite things about blind. How can you memorize, like how creative can you get with your memory? Make your memo as fun as possible because it's hard. It's very difficult to do. So the more interesting you can make it, the more fun you can have with it, the better off you are. So far we have LCRX, right? And then X goes to L, right? Oh, and that means that I have hit my cycle, right? So by the time I hit L, because it started with L, LCRXL, that means this is back in its original spot. Don't think about that too hard because it's confusing. Maybe it's not to you, but it was to me in the first place. But since we had originally swapped with L, if we run into L again, and this means L or F, by the way, if we run into this spot again, then we've ended our cycle more or less. So LCRXL, that's 5, might solve the cube. So let's start tracing and see if this will solve the cube, if it solves all the pieces. LCRXL, or no, that's not L, XL. And as you notice, we've missed one piece here. We have missed this piece, which is a swap, or not a swap, flip. So I know at this point now that when I finish LCRXL, these two pieces are going to be exactly the same because this one's flipped. And these are all going to be solved, the ones I have my fingers on. So I can even now infer to solve the cube, to finish this out, I'm going to have to do a flip here of ED, right? So there's an education, like that's what I would use for ED at this point, going like, less than Jake, MCR, 99X, LED. Oh, there we go. And then LED, they're playing a show at a 99X concert the 99X is sponsoring a concert and they've got LEDs everywhere. So LCRX LED. And I'm just going to I don't know. I'm not super good at blind. I'm not super confident in this, but I'm going to try that out real quick. I'm going to close my eyes and see if something is flipped here. I think I have it with this. I'm just going to try it out and hope that this works. Now, I'm about to genuinely attempt this. I'm not this good to know for a fact that this is going to be solved. Here's the critical part. I would love for you to do the same thing, by the way. Here's the critical part about it. When I end this, if it is unsolved, if I have made a mistake, I need to be able to identify that mistake. If I can't figure out what I did wrong, then this was pretty much a lost solve. The thing that I love about blind is that if you can identify what you did wrong, it's almost like you solved it. It's almost like it's just as good as a solve. It's almost more important to be able to identify what you've done wrong rather than get it right, because you'll learn about what shortcomings you have. You'll learn like, oh, my setup moves are weak, or confusing, oh, I got a position swapped. So I know that I'm prone to swapping that position. Oh, maybe I missed a turn in my T-perm. If you can pinpoint that, then it might as well have been a finished solve. If you can pinpoint that with 100% accuracy. So it's not about getting it right at this point. When I do this, if I end up with an unsolved cube, but I know what went wrong, I'm going to be just as happy that, as if I would have gotten a solved cube. However, if I look down and it's basically a scrambled cube, that's going to frustrate me. And that's going to make me go like, dang, I need to take more time in understanding what I'm doing. So remember, it's not about getting it right. It's about knowing what you did if you get it wrong. So let's go ahead and try this out. We've got LCRXLED, right? So L. All right, I'm going to close my eyes and try this out. L. Also, I have a hard time when I close my eyes and start solving, knowing if I'm executing the algorithm correctly. So make sure you take your time, and also don't overthink the alg. You're just doing a T-perm. I have a tendency to overthink it and then like bungle up the actual algorithm by doing it too slow. C, LCR, C, C, R, is that right? I do that every time. I'm just going to assume I just did that algorithm right. I think I just did a Y-perm. LCR, X, I believe. Yeah. Okay, I did do that algorithm right last time. LCRX, LED, L, E. It's always tricky. D. All right, let's see what we got here. It's solved. So it did. Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, like, I really, it's, every time is a thrill for me. It's so much, even just with a couple of edges. Like, blind is fun in any capacity. It's not about full blind solves. It's just about like knowing the concepts and executing the concepts, and it's magical every time it hits. So that's really it. You can, at this point, go to CS Timer and pull up an edges only scramble, you know. But that's kind of how blind works is, you know, you have these letter pairs, you create stories with them, and then you do corners and edges, right? Getting your hands familiar with these concepts will allow you to have a full 3 blind solve more successfully. So if you spent a day or two with corners, I suggest spending a day with edges, or at least a few hours, just playing with edges, just getting familiar with how they work. The setup moves are very different, so it feels kind of different. So yeah, spend some time with corners and edges separately, and then we can start like getting into doing a full blind solve.